Hello and welcome to another episode of our Brothers Creed podcast,
where we inspire fathers to build the blueprint for the next generation.
We are the Thomas Brothers. I'm Jared.
And I'm Ethan.
Today we're talking about different stages of fatherhood. Over the next 4 episodes, Ethan and I are going to discuss 6 different stages of fatherhood that we've researched and talk about how at different points in your life, stages if you will, their way that you need to father, and technically this isn't just fathering, it's kind of parenting altogether, changes from before the baby's even born to being a grandparent. And so we're going to walk through some of these, and we're excited to break these up into a couple of different episodes and really dive in on some of the nuances that we've experienced. Some of these Ethan and I have heavy experience with, especially the ones we're going to talk about today with kind of pre-birth or the anticipation stage, as well as infancy stage. Ethan and I are heavily seasoned in that. Between both of us, we have 8 different experiences of being kids, you know.
Still elbows deep in that one.
Yeah, so, and then as we go, kind of get more towards the later life stages, we can talk about, other people we know, our experiences with the kind of dads that we want to be, and stuff like that. So I guess as a disclaimer, or I think it's important to say up front that the stuff we talk about, I think, is a mixture of lessons learned. So things that I think that maybe I did that I was like, oh, maybe that was good. And then some things I'm going to share are things that I maybe didn't do so well, and that I'm sharing because I'm like, I would go back and do this a little bit differently. Nobody is going to get it right their first time, but I think being intentional about getting it right makes all the difference. As long as you're trying to be a good dad, it makes a world of difference. And so Ethan and I are going to share our experiences and maybe some things we've done right, maybe some things we wish we've done right, or maybe some things if we could whisper back to our younger selves, hey, pay attention to this, what would we say? So it's going to be an interesting chat the next few episodes.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting, and parenting is always one of those topics that's like, some people either feel judged that whenever there's conversations around parenting, people are like, oh, are you judging me because you did it this way and I do it this other way? Or, there's all different types of parenting. And I mean, hey, this is just how Jared and I have kind of looked at things, and especially in the stages that we have been through so far. We're kind of look back and say, hey, these were the awesome things that I really liked. These were maybe some of the hard things that man, I struggled with, and other people probably did too. But what I'll say to kind of kick it off too is that never don't listen to the haters. I heard a thing today that it was, don't accept criticism from someone who you would not ask for advice. And so basically, if someone says something that's against you or criticizing you, if you wouldn't have gone to that person and asked them for advice, then who cares what they say? But if it is someone who you would go to and ask for advice, hey, what do you think about this? Then obviously you care what they have to say in their opinion, and you could take that. Don't take it as hate, because I think anybody who is out there, anybody I know that I would go to and ask advice for, that person wants nothing but the best for me. And so that was kind of one thing. And then another thing is, whenever I have 4 kids. My oldest is turning 11 this year, and my youngest is 3. And I've been to a lot of these things. It's kind of weird because I'm mid-30s, right? And there's people at work that are either my age or older than me that are like now having their first child. And so you like go to these baby showers or things at work, and they're like, oh, what kind of advice would you give as a parent? And, I've always heard a lot of different things, but one thing that I always say is that try not to compare your child to other kids, right? kids are different sizes, they're different shapes, they're different intelligences, they grow at different rates, right? Comparison is the thief of joy, and it can make you feel like a bad parent, right? And that is even anything as little as like, oh, your baby is 2 months older than mine, and it's my baby's crawling and your baby is not crawling, or oh, your baby's 2 years old and not potty trained. Oh, wow, we've potty trained since a
Yeah.
year and a half, right? And so it's like, hey, don't even within your own family, it's hard. Try not to compare your kids one to each other from like a development standpoint, because they develop at different points. And this is kind of one of the things that I was going to share later on. But I had one kid that my second son, he was like pulling up and standing at 6 months, and he was walking well before a year. But then I had another child that didn't walk until like 14 or 15 months, and so it's just that spread. We were like, oh, what's wrong? What's wrong? What's wrong? It's like nothing. It's just they develop at different rates.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so that was just kind of one thing that I wanted to kind of start off with before we get into some of these things, is kind of my, I don't know, the advice from an amateur parent, I'd say.
Yeah, I think that I really think that that is sound advice. And something that we've said before on the podcast is that I think that there's two different philosophies on rearing children. One of them is, well, is the analogy of, it's my job to mold this clay into what it needs to be. That's one analogy, and that's one methodology of parenting. The other analogy, and that I think more along the lines of what you just said, is my job is to grow this seed into a tree, and it can be and I have a handful of different seeds here. My job is to grow this seed into the best kind of tree it can be, and so it's not so much about
So,
molding.
sometimes trees need pruning, right? But
Yeah,
a lot of times
yeah.
they'll grow how they grow.
But it's each tree is unique in itself, and it's different from the others, and you can't just like, sometimes it's raising these kids so that they can be themselves and not just this mold that you have for them. Yeah, very, very interesting. Well, let's start talking about the first stage here. So the first stage is what we would call the anticipation or pre-birth stage. So this is when your wife drops on you that you're pregnant. She shows you those two lines, and you're like, "Oh man, we're in the end game now." And so my wife, whenever she would show me the lines, she would take a pregnancy test so early, the lines would be like so faint. I'm like, I don't see it, and she's like, if you hold it just in this, and she was always right. She was always right. I'll just say that, but. She was like, if you hold it in the light just right, then you can see that there's two lines. I was like, I don't know, that maybe that's just like where like the testing material was, or something. But eventually the lines always got darker as the woman gets. Oh, I don't want to say more pregnant, but like as the pregnancy progresses, there's more of that in those. What is it exactly that's in your pee? It's like the
It's like the hormones and
hormones, yeah.
stuff that that
The
react
pregnancy hormones.
to make
It's,
the lines.
maybe it's like the progesterone or something or I'm not sure exactly which one it is, but anyway, so once you get that, the game is on. And one thing I wanted to talk about specifically first is financially, getting ready financially. So getting financially secure. Oftentimes, obviously, the best scenario is to say, I am financially ready to have this baby, and it's coming, and you have all the ability to fund that baby's life. If you're some cases, that's ideal. In some cases, that's not happening. So you do have 9 months, so you have a little bit of a runway here. So I think it's a real wake-up call if you're not in a situation where you're making enough money or you're pulling in the financial means to support another human being to really change things up. 9 months is a long time. it's enough time for you to get some skills, maybe upgrade your job, maybe get a promotion. And so focus on that. Prepare for your wife to take a break. Maybe she's leaving the workforce, or maybe she's just taking a maternity leave and she would be returning to the workforce. Whatever it is, she's probably going to be out of commission for at least a couple weeks. And so you want to give her that time with the baby. So
to kind of go in with
Yeah.
finances too, a lot of things that we learned as new parents was that there was a lot of stuff that was unnecessary from a baby's perspective. It's like you buy all these things and all the gadgets and the gifts and this and that or whatever, and the best of the best. And it's like, that stroller is going to get thrown in the bottom of the car and scratched around the floor of the garage just the same as maybe a stroller that wasn't as expensive or whatever else it might be. Do you need all the little trinkets and all the things? No, you don't. Sometimes they're cool to have, but you can grow into some of those things.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of a cautionary thing. People think, and the industry, the baby item industry, really capitalizes on this. Like, do you want to be a good parent? Then you need to spend tons of money, and that, in a way, is false. Because you don't have to spend tons of money to properly raise your kids or afford the things you need for your kids. In some situations, I do think that there are lower quality things, and there are higher quality things that sometimes are worth the extra expense. One thing, especially about buying things, the typical things you want to buy: crib, diapers, clothes, car seat, lots of stuff. Actually, for us, we didn't even use our crib for the first 6 months. We just used kind of a bassinet. We used like a swing that we had for a while. But one thing that's really important is check the recalls on the items that you're purchasing. If someone's just giving you a bunch of stuff, that's great. But check those items to make sure there aren't recalls on those items. There was a kind of a little rocker that we had, and it kind of propped the baby up. But the way that it propped the baby up, it was possible that the baby's neck could get like pinched, and there was a handful of babies that had suffocated and died because they were sleeping in this thing, and they recalled that product. One of our children slept in that thing for probably 3 months, and so I don't think it was recalled, or we don't think we knew that while that was happening. But that's one thing that I wish I had been more aware of, what recalls were out there. I know my wife was aware of that, but there's a lot going on. Women have a lot going on at that time. So I felt like I needed, in hindsight, I would tell myself, like, you need to be more aware of the products and the stuff that you're using, because you can't just lean on your wife, to know all that. So that's one thing and also think logically about how to use your products. Sometimes they'll recall something because people use it in a stupid way. Like, there's these things called like a bumbo, right? It's like a little seat, and people were putting them on the counters, and they would put their babies in it and put the baby on the counter, and the babies would fall off the counter. And it's like, yeah, no crap. So just think about how you're using some of these products. Think logically. And, it's like, don't use your hair blower in the shower. It's like your hair dryer in the shower. It's like, yeah, no crap. Why do they have to freaking put that on the label? So just think logically about this. And, so that's another thing, is like just thinking logically. That's another thing I'll talk about in just a minute or so. But you got to have kind of an objective head in these situations to say, is this product being used the appropriate way? So that's kind of goes all in with like financially. Your wife is going to be nesting. She's going to be wanting to get all this stuff, and you will be too. So that, and then one additional thing I would say, save up some money for those hospital bills that are going to come. Depending on if you have insurance or not. Heck, we had insurance. We had decent insurance. We still paid probably four to $6,000 per kid, and I've had pretty good insurance every single child. So it's still pretty expensive. I think you're kind of in the same boat, right, Ethan?
Yeah, it was about the same. And it was kind of interesting too. Our first two kids, I literally had started a job like our first kid. I started a job 3 days before he was born, and it was my first job out of college. And he came 2 weeks early. We moved from Idaho to California. My wife was 8.5 months pregnant, and I started a job, and then she had the baby 2 weeks early. Everything was healthy, and he was over 8 pounds and everything. But it was kind of like, oh shoot, I just started this new job, and luckily, yeah, we had insurance and it was good and everything, but didn't get to take up a whole bunch of time because I just barely started. And then our second kid, I had literally just started a job probably 2 weeks before we had our second kid, and I didn't have any PTO or anything. I think they gave me like a day, so I took like a day, and I was like, oh shoot, But then my last two kids, a larger kind of finance company that had much more generous benefits around paternity leave. But yeah, it's important to kind of just feel prepared and like feel that you have kind of at least thought about it, and you're like, okay, we're going to go here. At least whenever we moved from California with our first child, well, my wife was 8.5 months pregnant. Literally the day after we got there, we had an appointment with the local doctor, and we went and we saw that doctor, and then we met her. We did a tour of the hospital and everything, and then literally like 2 days later, my wife went into labor. We didn't even have a car seat. I remember I went and I bought a car seat while we were in the hospital, to bring back to the hospital. So, but it's just fun times. I mean, me personally, I loved just pregnancy stage of fatherhood. And maybe this is kind of selfish and whatever else, but this might sound kind of weird, but it's like just your wife's belly is growing, and she's glowing, and everybody's excited, and it's kind of, you got in public and like everybody knows that you did that, and it's just like, and it's just such a fun time, it's something that's so different, and it's so, to me, it was just very magical that this is like happening in our bodies. How amazing are our bodies to be able to do this and to create life. And so I always just really loved that pregnancy stage. I mean, there's always ups and downs of every stage. But you'll get to know your wife and I guess each other too on a much more personal level, kind of in that anticipation stage. You'll get closer than you've really experienced before, probably just from being married. And maybe some I guess heeds of or suggestions to look out for, things of warning is any expecting fathers out there, or someone who has not yet been to this stage of fatherhood, is that many times your wife might be sick or uncomfortable or both at the same time. In fact, I say many times, but a lot of times she will be. And so that is going to require extra effort and time on our parts as fathers, not only to take care of our wives, but to take care of our children that are in our wives' bellies, which, making them feel served and loved and everything else is really kind of a huge aspect that I don't know. I guess we can ask my wife, but I think did halfway decent at least tried. It's kind of like you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe I did better on the later times, or maybe worse. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think you
But
too is that you were, I mean, your last kid, you probably did better than the first kid. The first kid, you were what, like 20, 23 or 24?
Yeah.
And you had just graduated college? I mean, for all intents and purposes, you didn't know jack, and neither did she. So you guys were kind of
Yeah.
just trying to face the world and trying to learn the best you could. And by the time you had your fourth kid, you were like, oh man, we've been down this road before. We know what we're doing. But also, you guys were way out in California. You didn't actually have a lot of family. You didn't have hardly any
No.
family around, or very little support. So that was a really tough. I imagine that was a really tough time.
Yeah, and we kind of, and I'll get into this a little bit further in the new father stage, but with our first one, I mean, he was a gem. I mean, he was just like from a baby. He was awesome. You know, he's sleeping through the night at like 3 months, or sooner. Not tons of crying, super cuddly. I mean, he was just an awesome baby. So we were just extremely blessed on that first one. And then we thought that was going to be the same thing for the rest of them, but that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
But before we kind of get into and maybe you had some more things on anticipation.
Yeah, I had a few more things. Yeah.
So I have one more thing too, but you can add to that a little bit, and then I'll end with a story.
Okay. Yeah. So, well, I will say this, because someone lied to me, and I want to dispel this rumor to anybody who's listening. At least the bulk of it. Somebody told me, "Oh man, when your wife's pregnant, oh she's just really ready to go all the time," and I was like, "Oh, that sounds fun," you know. But the reality is no. I mean, the first trimester, at least in my wife's situation,
She's super sick.
she's super sick, and in some cases, some women are really sick the whole time. But the first trimester is really where a lot of those rush of hormones come. Second trimester, it's not so bad. She's kind of in this in-between stage. She's not huge yet. But dude, once you hit that third trimester, she's got a basketball she's carrying around. She can't sleep. She's ornery. She doesn't want to be on you at all. And so there's only really a window of maybe like 2 or 3 weeks where she might be interested. But it's not like this thing that like somebody was like, oh yeah, it's going to be so fun. I was like, nah, dude. No. It's not a comfortable situation for her to be in. The fun happened before when she got pregnant.
In creation, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I do have a couple other things. So I think it's important to mentally prepare for the baby as much as financially. Preparing for the birth is one thing. I think it's so important to learn how to support your wife during her birth, whether that means creating a birth plan or just educating yourself on what happens during birth. Shannon, my wife, and I went to some birthing classes at the hospital to kind of learn how what happens, what should we know, what should we do, what should we plan on. Our plan went out the window, but at least we kind of knew what we were doing. We kind of knew what to expect a little bit, and I think the very fact that we were out there trying to learn says a lot too. I also said, prepare yourself and your wife physically to go to the hospital, right? Get your stuff together. Also, you want to be comfortable in the hospital. You need to prepare yourself to take in a new human being. Imagine if someone was giving you it's not even comparable to say someone's giving you an expensive animal that really has a lot of special needs that you have to take care of it. Someone's giving you a human to take care of. It's incredibly expensive, and there's very nuanced ways to take care of it, and you need to learn that. So you need to learn how to change a diaper. You need to know how to baby-proof your house. You need to know how to hold a baby. You need to know how to burp a baby. You need to know how to use a bottle and how to breastfeed. Obviously, that's more on the women's side initially, but guys can help there as much as they can. You need to know some first aid. You need to know what a couple sicknesses are that babies can have. What does jaundice look like? What is whooping cough like? What is these different things I need to be aware of? And also, you need to think of a name. Think of a name. That's so important.
One thing you said, you were like, you need to prepare physically to go to the hospital, right? Have a bag packed or whatever. Well, on our first kid, my wife was feeling contractions and stuff like that, and it was like, we were like, should we go to the hospital or not? And so we're like, well, let's just go just check it out, right? And I'm sure we'll be back. So I literally just said, well, I'll just throw in an extra shirt just in case. I literally threw a shirt in my backpack, and then lo and behold, we're there for like 3 days, and
Yeah,
then
exactly.
all I had was an extra shirt.
Yeah. And so uh, embarking on a serious endeavor. One thing you mentioned, Ethan, is that during that time of pregnancy, often you and your wife will come together. It's like this coming together in preparation for a big event or for a race, and it's really, and you might be like, oh man, I've never felt closer to my wife, but you have to prepare for that baby to come, and that baby's gonna need space. And you guys are gonna be working on raising that baby, and so the relationship changes now, especially in the short term, especially for a first time mom, and even after that, there's a point where she's not going to be. It's all about the baby for a time, and obviously you'll come back into the picture, hopefully, sooner than later. But you have to realize that that baby can't survive without mom or you providing in different means and ways. So you have to be prepared for that shift in dynamics of the relationship that comes with a new baby. So you had a story that you wanted to share, Ethan, and go ahead.
Yeah, so you were at the beginning talking about the pregnancy test and everything. So on our first um, child, I was in college. I was just about to graduate. I think I was in my last semester, second to last semester, and my wife, she was already graduated, and so we were been married for several years, and we're like, hey, we're ready, right? We're, quote unquote, air quotes, ready. And so we started trying to have a baby or get pregnant. And, we tried for a little while. Sometimes when you just get off of birth control and it takes a little while to kind of reset hormones and get pregnant and different things like that. Some people it takes a long time. Every relationship is individual and personal, right?
You mean
Um,
every uterus is individual, first of all?
yeah,
Every
yeah,
woman's body is totally different.
yes. But so we were, Caitlin, she had been a little bit late on her period, and we are like, oh, okay, and so she had. I was because I was in school. I was home. I was at home studying and doing homework during the middle of the day, and so she decided to come home for lunch, and we had lunch together, and then she kind of surprised me with a little gift, and I was like, oh, what is this? And so I opened this gift, and there was a pregnancy test in there. And she was like, oh, I knew exactly what it was. And I was like, oh, we're so excited. And it was like this big moment that she was all giddy. And I think she like even filmed it on her phone. And it was just like this super awesome moment that we had. And, we hugged and everything else. And then she had to get back to work. So she went back to work, and I went back to studying. And then as I was sitting there, I was just like, my mind was just racing, and I was like, I just don't feel like, I feel really weird, like something just feels off. I don't feel right. And so I was sitting there, and I was trying to understand this feeling that I was feeling. And so I kind of got up and I walked over to where the gift was, the pregnancy test that she'd given me, and I was kind of looking at it. And I was just staring at the lines and stuff on it. I was like, I don't know. And so I went upstairs to the bathroom, and I was rummaging through the bathroom cabinet, and I found the box that had the pregnancy test in it. And I pulled out the instruction paper that's like this big sheet in there, and I was kind of reading through it and all sort of kind of stuff. And then when it comes to the portion where it gives you like what the results look like, what a positive and a negative would look like, and I was holding them up, I was matching them, and it was negative. It was, this pregnancy test was as negative as you could get it, and I was like, oh shoot! I was just like, oh man! I was like, I guess she misread it, or maybe something was off, but I mean, it was like not positive at all. And so I was like, what do I do? Do I
Yeah.
call her? She's at work. I was like, do I call her? Do I just wait till she gets home and then we can talk about it? And I was like, well, if it was me, then I'd want to know right away. And
Yeah.
so I gave her a call and I was like, hey, I just felt like something was a little weird about this pregnancy test. I was just looking at it on the counter and I was like, are we sure that this is right? She was like, yeah, and so I was like, I don't know. And I kind of tried to ease into it. And then I sent her the picture of what the pregnancy test and the results,
And the
and then
instructions.
what a negative test would be. And I was like, this really looks negative to me. And I mean, I basically just destroyed our world, and it was just like, oh man. And so I mean, obviously she was upset or whatever else, and I think she took like 5 more pregnancy tests that night or whatever, and they all came back negative, and we're just like, oh man, But it's so funny because I was just talking to her about it tonight. It's like we look back at that moment, and it was like the biggest deal for us and for her and everything else, and the disappointment and everything. But now we look back at it, and it's just like this hilarious story that we laugh about that like we're probably going to tell our grandkids, and so it's just you kind of have to take things in stride, and you know it's all's well that ends well, I guess.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Because I think that next round we ended up getting pregnant. But it's just a fun story that we like to tell the kids.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Yeah, I mean it's a tough stage to be in that pre-pregnancy stage, and the business. I called it. I would call it the business of getting pregnant. It is a roller coaster. For some folks, it is more of a roller coaster than for others. And my wife and I have had our own roller coaster, and we've known some. Heck, one of our sisters, or actually, in fact, both of our sisters have had kind of roller coasters and their own fertility, and it can be
Miscarriages and just issues, just
yeah, it can be an exhausting
trials,
yeah, and it can be an
trials.
exhausting thing. We've known people who are as healthy as you'd think you can be, and they just cannot get pregnant. And you're like, how is that fair that some cracked out junkie, can get pregnant no problem, but someone who's going to the gym every day and eating healthy can't get pregnant, so or does and loses the baby, a couple weeks in or a trimester in or something like that. So it is very difficult. Those whipsaws in emotions and
Yeah.
so it's a tough time. So you got to be tough, and you think about it as, that's what kind of the way I framed it to my wife. I'm like, we're in the business of having babies, and like not every single one of these is gonna take all the way to the end. And if we're gonna be in the business of having babies, we got to be tough enough to kind of withstand this storm.
Yeah. Well,
Because
and
it's tough.
I mean, in this instance, we're specifically talking about fatherhood and babies and stuff like that. But every couple has their challenges, right? Maybe some couples, their challenges is fertility. Maybe others are, financial or poverty, or
Yeah.
maybe other people have, massive issues with their families and stuff like that. And so, there's that was one thing that I had to really kind of look back and understand is that, yeah, sometimes you look at the Joneses and it looks like everything is perfect and everything is, great over there, but everybody's got their struggles, their trials, and you just got to just love people and support them through. One thing that just really grinds my gears, right, is the I told you. No, not the I told you so. It's there's the I told you so person, but then the even worse than I told you so person is the just wait person. Oh, you just wait. You just wait until, it's like you have your first kid and you're sleepless nights with your first baby, or that's just crying and crying and crying, and then you're seeking some sort of solace and trust in somebody, and they say, oh well, you just wait until you have two. It's like, Oh, you just wait until they're in high school. You just wait until, you have 3 kids, or you just
Yeah.
wait until they potty train, or you just wait. And it's like, that's such a demeaning of someone's current experience. Like, I try not to say that.
It's a one-upping.
And
It's
yeah,
someone who's trying to one
it's
up.
like a parental one up. You just wait until, they start dating, or until your daughter turns 16, or it's just like, you know, I don't know. That always really has just rubbed me the wrong way, because by you doing that, you are just immediately discounting any struggle that I'm personally feeling, and just saying that, it's going to get worse, or I'm going to have, that because your situation was this was some way, that mine's going to be the exact same way. So,
Or, oh, you think that's bad? Like,
yeah.
what about this or what about that? Or I've gone through worse. Like, why are you complaining to me? I've gone through worse. And it's like, well, so if we're having a
Yeah.
hard time and we're being open and honest with you about the hard time that we're having, why are you coming back and saying that, you know, we can't be open and honest because it's not as hard as you had
Yeah.
it or someone else had it?
Well, and there's someone else that has it worse than them, who has it worse than them, who has it worse than them, right? And so it's just like, it's a never-ending cycle that I try to stop the buck with me, and validate people's struggles. Like, heck yeah, I don't care if you have 1 kid or 10 kids, right? There are certain aspects that, oh man, yeah, that freaking sucks. I remember that, you know.
And there's a lot. Yeah. I mean,
Or right now we're just particularly talking about struggles, but it's the same way on the other side with just awesome stuff,
yeah.
and I think it's just a lot of times the struggles are just kind of what's on the face of it. But kids are worth it.
Yeah.
Caveat.
Yeah. I mean,
Spoiler alert.
I mean, it's a tough stage. I would say that infancy, the real little stage, I mean, the babies are freaking cute, but you're not really getting a lot out of that baby. I mean, a few cute cuddles and oohs and ahs,
Yeah.
and that's fresh baby smell that you only get in the first 2-3 weeks. Man,
Yeah.
just
I
eat
literally
that
wrote
up.
down here. I said naps and snuggles with babies are the best thing in the world. Is literally what I put down on
Yeah, yeah.
my first bullet. Right. You've never slept so good until you have like a little tiny baby sleeping on your chest, and you're just laying on the couch, like carefree. Right. And it's just,
Yeah, it's good, man. There's some good stuff. But each of our kids, man. Some of our kids, I love that. Some of our kids, man. I was just so anxious whenever they were awake, because I was just like, they're not getting. Are they getting enough food? Are they gonna get sick? Or are they gonna get? They're gonna put something in their mouth. So that was my first kids. After like 3 or 4 kids, you're like, dude, he's fine.
yeah.
So it
Yeah.
does change you over time.
Well, and it's interesting too, because like the first child, right, gets all the attention, and really you can almost enjoy those cuddles and those naps and everything else, because it's like, I'm not in my mind, I'm not worried about anything, anybody else, or any other kids running around.
yeah,
um but yeah, I mean, it's so different. Our last child, he would spit up. He spit up for like the first year. He would just spit up like crazy all the time. And I wouldn't say he was like a massively fussy baby. He would just spit up all the time, and it was just miserable to hold him. And so he didn't get as much. He didn't get held as much as the other kids. Now he's just like the freaking cutest thing in the world. So he gets held more than any of the other kids. But yeah, they're just so different.
yeah. I mean, and you have to think about, like, meanwhile, all this is going on. You're living your life. You're trying to deal with. I mean, especially when you have more than one kid, you're dealing with multiple situations. I mean, when we had our fourth kid, I was like, all right, honey, I'll watch the 3 kids. You just manage the baby. And that was like a picnic
Yeah.
for her. When we had our first kid, well, it wasn't a picnic, but it was just like, okay, thank you for just letting me watch the one kid. When we had our first baby, I was like, right there, I was like, what can I do? How can I help? And it's just like, we were both just like, the baby won't stop crying. Swaddle the baby again. Swaddle the baby again. It's just like, I got really good at swaddling babies. But so I had a couple things, just a couple things to keep in mind. Maybe I'll share one or two of these, and then you can share.
Yeah. I
some of
have
your
one,
stuff.
one or two.
So, and this is kind of more when the baby comes. and that infancy stage. We've kind of talked about that. So we talk about the anticipation stage, and then the infancy stage. I mean, this is kind of like 0 to 2 years old. So from birth to about 2 years old. The baby's little. They're not doing much. They're not saying much. Maybe they start crawling. You're going to deal with challenges. You're going to deal with late nights. You're going to deal with a lot of these things. And so one thing I would say is that you want to keep in mind that the relationship with your wife and the dynamic is going to be focused on that baby. There's a lot with that baby, and it's not just going to be you and her anymore. It's you, her, and the baby. And so you have to leave space for that and be mentally prepared for that, that it's going to be a little bit different. You're now a father, and she's now a mother. And so it's important to know that, and also to be intentional about taking your wife, continuing to date your wife. Take her on dates, say, hey, we've got a neighbor that can watch the baby, or a mother-in-law, or a mother, or maybe a sister, or a trusted person, that can watch the baby for an hour or two, and you go out and escape and go on a date. It's actually really important for the mom to just get a little bit of a break from the baby, because she's probably going to be a little stir crazy, a little touched out. So take her on a date, go see a movie, go out to dinner, and be intentional about that dating your wife, because if you're not, it's just very easy to focus all your energies on the baby, and then you just become like two parties raising a child, and you forget about your own relationship. So that's important. And the next thing is that I would say is after, and this is in my experience, is that after a baby is born, it can be a very tough time for the mother. There's a lot of changes in hormones that are going on, and a significant amount of responsibility that is being placed on the mother. And so oftentimes, not often, I'll say there are situations where mothers will have, the postpartum, and sometimes they call them baby blues. In some cases, it can be as much as a postpartum depression. In some cases, it can be very extreme. My brother-in-law had a buddy who was in medical school, and they had a brand new baby, and his wife was very, very depressed with postpartum depression, and she ended up killing herself because she was so depressed, and she just didn't really communicate it very well, or he just kind of maybe didn't realize the extent at which she was at, and she called the police, and she said, someone needs to come and get my baby right now. And she went out back and did the deed, and that was it. Now he's a single dad. And so I definitely have not had that experience, thank God. But I have had the experience of just, and if I could look back and whisper into my own ear, I would say, think a little bit more, like be a little bit more of an independent thinker. And what that means is, like, my wife is incredibly smart, and I would trust her, and I'm like, oh yeah, she's doing lots of research, and she's doing great. And then, so when we have the baby, after the baby's here, it's kind of like, well, if she tells me she needs something, she'll tell me, or if she's feeling whichever way, she'll come tell me. And so, or she knows what's going on. She took the baby to the doctor. And so, like, there was one situation where our second was just crying all the time. And we didn't know why. And my wife was kind of I think that she was in like a real bad mental state. And the baby was crying all the time. The baby actually, we took her to the pediatrician, and the baby was like, the pediatrician was like, I don't know. I mean, looking back, I was like, dude, we should have got a second opinion. The pediatrician was some freaking lady from like Ukraine or some Balkan state that was like, dude,
you need to swaddle tighter.
Yeah, I was like, where did you freaking get your graduate degree? And she never said anything. Our child had was diagnosed like basically failure to thrive because it didn't hit any of any of his targets for growth. And we're like, what's going on? The baby's just crying all the time. And in hindsight, the baby was starving. It wasn't getting enough food from breastfeeding, but we didn't know that. And the doctor just kept saying, keep doing what you're doing. And so we're like, okay. And so that was kind of like when my wife was, and she was, and I was just kind of like, well, my wife is taking care of it. She knows. And I wish I kind of had taken a little bit more of a, like, okay, I'm the only one here. I'm obviously involved with this situation, but I'm not, my hormones aren't going crazy from like this postpartum situation that I'm in. I'm not the baby. And I wish I would have had a little bit more clear eyes to say like, okay, what is the situation? Not just like with my baby, but with my wife and everything. And how can I help the situation? At the time I was like, okay, we're declaring a family emergency. And then we just, like, we got to figure this thing out. So have a level head, watch out for your wife and how she's feeling, and be involved with what the doctors are saying. Understand what's going on. Understand how your wife is doing. Communicate with her. Ask her how she's doing. Maybe she needs, if she's feeling really bad, maybe she does need to go on some medicine to help her balance out her mental state so that she can manage things, or so that she can be present while that baby's there. And so that is a very difficult thing that I think a lot of women have there's a lot of shame that's put on women for that. I think in the 2025, we need to break down that wall and say, hey, dads, let's step up and let's keep an eye out for our wives. And it's hard to say that you're not emotionally involved, because you absolutely are, but you're not going through this roller coaster of all these emotions that your body's going through. So you are probably the most level-headed person there, and your wife needs that, and your kid needs that. So I would say keep your head on a swivel and be there to understand, because even though you do trust your wife and you do trust her judgment, at that time, maybe she might not. And so you're like, okay, maybe she's a different version of herself during that period than you normally are used to. She might look the same, but maybe upstairs in her mind, she's totally checked out, or she's just like, man, I can't live another day like this, So you got to be really aware of that. And it just absolutely breaks my heart that, some folks are go through that, and, like my brother-in-law's buddy, and just absolutely horrible. So as a father, I think you've got to be there for that. You've got to be the rational person in the room. You've got to be involved enough to see the signs of things that might need to be adjusted or fixed.
Yeah, 100%. I don't think I could have said it any better. That was one of the things that I had on my list as well, was postpartum. It is definitely 100% real, and 100% not a choice of the mother. Imagine all of the changes that was going on through puberty, for example, and then you have all of that and plus tons and tons more in a tiny little window.
Plus a new human being to take care of.
Yeah.
Plus your your mother-in-law or some snarky lady down the street saying, "Well, I did it with 4 and I was fine."
Yeah, you just wait until you have your second one, and then you would tell me about it. It's
like, you're like, "Oh, thanks. That's really helping me not want to kill myself right now."
Yeah.
And we got a lot of that. And
yeah, for sure.
Like that's what people would say, and it's like, "Oh man, we're actually having a real hard time with our kid." Well, just wait till you have 3. It's like, dude, that literally doesn't help at all. And that really makes me want to open up to you, and tell you about the struggles that I'm going through.
Yeah. Hopefully, I get to the point as a grandparent someday. Hopefully I'll be a grandparent someday.
Yeah.
That, my wife and I look back and we'll be like, how can we support, our kids in this crazy time of their life?
Yeah.
Right? Like, hey, we're going to come take the rest of the kids and we'll take them away for a week, or, I don't know. But
or let us come watch the kids or watch the baby for at least one night or 1 or 2 nights a month so you guys can go on a date. Or there's so many things.
You won't even, you won't even know we're here, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to entertain us, right? We will literally do. You don't even have to leave your bedroom, and we will take care of everything, right?
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I just hope that, I think both you and I have, had close encounters with this whole postpartum thing, and it's rough. It's rough for sure. And I think a lot of people now are kind of understanding to the extent that it's not just a fleeting feeling. It's
Or it's not just that you're a bad mom.
serious. Yeah.
Or, well, if you were a good mom, you would do X, Y, and Z. It's like, no.
Yeah.
I think that's also kind of a boomer way of thinking, actually. And I think that, like, as the changing of the guard, like us millennial dads are more involved with our kids than any prior generation, probably, at least in the past 100 years. And so we need to be more attuned to this kind of thing. And so, some of these old boomers, well, I didn't have any paternity leave. So that's kind of a thing. It's just like, okay.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that you weren't there to suppose not that you weren't there, but not that you weren't there to support, because you were supporting in a different way, right? By going to work, right? That's a huge support. Just so your wife doesn't have to worry about financial ruin as well, right? But maybe you didn't get to see all of the ins and outs and intricacies of all of the issues that were going on during the day.
Yeah.
But
then at the same time, like, it's like that thing where it's like, well, I paid my, so some women would be like, well, I paid my dues and my husband never had paternity leave and I was all by myself and I had these kids. It's like,
I'd say,
okay, but
do you
want that for your grandkids? Do you want that for your children?
Yeah, I'd say congratulations. I mean, like,
everybody always wants to feel like, but the thing is, like, I don't know. It's like some people, they wear that as like a badge of honor. It's like, well, I didn't have any help at all, and we were poor, and we did it fine. It's like, I'm sorry that you went through that situation. Maybe you need to be validated in that, but is that what you want me to go through?
It wasn't postpartum depression. It was just a little bit of stress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
right.
So,
So that's definitely one, definitely important. I think we spent a good amount of time, and I think you really spelled it out very well, Jared. Another one that I had, and then this kind of wraps it up for me, is another thing that stigma or stereotype that I always hated, and my wife would agree with this as well, is that, like, the, I don't know, the incompetent, weak dad who can't handle being in the delivery room because the sight of blood or any kind of smell makes him gag and throw up and faint, and then the nurses are taking more care of the father who fell and busted his head on the floor than the wife, and it's just like, dude, what friggin' weak husband. If you can't stand the sight of blood and whatever else and fluids or whatever and flesh, then, stay up by your wife's head and support her that way. If you think you're going to faint and whatever standing there is whatever, then ask for a stool, right? Or just, like, I don't know. I don't know. To me, it's like, if you can't support your wife, dude, how can she trust you with anything else if she can't even trust you to support her in one of her most vulnerable moments in her entire life?
Yeah, dude. I knew this one guy. It went, like, well beyond that. I mean, I think that, like, he was like, oh man, can we just give her some more medicine because she's making a lot of noise right now? Jeez, I'm trying to watch a movie here. Like in the like, he literally said that, and then this dude, literally, he has like 3 kids. He's never changed a diaper. Like, it's just kind of like, if your wife can't trust you with the baby, if your wife couldn't leave you with a baby for, say, it wouldn't trust you with a baby for 2-3 days, then you're probably weak sauce and you have major things that you need to do. I mean, obviously if you have like milk and stuff to feed the baby, but you need to be competent enough to take care of that baby for a number of days, or at the very least several hours. Hey, I'm going to watch the baby all day today. You go out with your friends and just take a break. She needs to be able to trust you that you can do that.
Yeah. Do not do that to your wife to where whenever you are alone with the kids, that she is worried, are my children okay? Yeah. I can't think of a worse thing for a wife to think is, are my children okay?
Are my children okay? Right? And is my husband cheating at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, and I guess maybe I should put that into context. Are my children okay? Like when they are being watched or alone by the father. And I had this one experience one time with our first kid. It was at church, and he was kind of crying, so I took him out into the hallway, and he was a baby. I mean, he was like less than 6 months. I was walking around the hallway, and there was another dad out there, and I was like, "Oh, you got stuck with babysitting duty as well?" And he looks at me and with like a straight face. I was just joking around. He looks at me with a straight face and goes, "It's not called babysitting when it's your own kid." And then he just turned and walked away. And I was just like, okay.
He's right though, man.
Which is true, dude. It's not babysitting when it's your own kid. It's a responsibility, right? You need to be capable. Yeah. And there in today's day and age of YouTube University, right? There is absolutely no reason why you can't be capable. You don't have to be the freaking baby soother or whatever else and do everything perfect. It's a learning experience, but man, be capable. Try.
You gotta know how to swaddle a baby, man.
Yeah, put forth some effort. Put forth some effort, and I guarantee you your wife will appreciate it immensely.
Well, in my experience, men that are like that across the board. It's not just with kids. Their wives probably treat them like another child. They probably treat their husband, whether it's from the wife or from the husband. Sometimes it's both. Sometimes it's one. Sometimes it's the other. But sometimes guys will put themselves in a position where they just are another child, and like they use this weaponized incompetence. Well, I can't ever get the milk the right temperature, so I'm just not going to do it. And sometimes wives are too over scrupulous and like, well, you don't ever get this right, or you don't get that, or you're doing it different than I want it, so it's not right.
You didn't load the dishwasher right.
Yeah.
I mean, that happens.
So it's just like there has to be some grace, but I think that a guy whose wife is worried about leaving her kids with them, that is a major red flag. And unfortunately, I've been around women who are like, their husband's texting him every 5 seconds, "Where's the macaroni? How long do I put it in the microwave for?" I'm like, bro, are you brain dead? Do some freaking research, dude. Your wife's out with her friends. Don't be a knucklehead. And unfortunately, there are a lot of guys that are like that in this world. And so that's not the kind of man you want to be. That's not how you build the blueprint for the next generation. You don't want to show your kids, oh, look, dad is some lame sauce dad. You want to say dad is a capable person. Mom would trust dad with her life, and she would trust the kids with her life. If your wife can't even trust you to make macaroni for the kids, you think she's going to trust you with her life? No. And that's the most minimal. There's no masculine energy there. So,
yeah, for sure.
That is a great point. I think we covered these two stages pretty well. Anticipation stage and then the new fatherhood stage. So basically from pre-birth to age 2. The next episode, we're going to talk about the hands-on stage, which is kind of 3 to 7 year old, and then the role model stage, which is kind of 8 to 12 years old. So Ethan and I both have kiddos that are right in these ranges. We've got the full spectrum right now. Well, actually, we're out of the new father stage. We're definitely out of the anticipation stage.
Yeah.
So we're right in these two, and then the last two we'll do in another episode. So we're excited for you guys to hear those, and please let us know if you agree or respectfully disagree with anything we've said today. So we'd love to hear it, and you can let us know and interact with us on Instagram, and we do still have a TikTok, assuming that it's still around and that they keep that going, and you can always email us at abrotherscreed@gmail.com to let us know anything, any suggested episodes or anything else. So we'd love to hear from you. And with that, let's build our creed together.
All right, let's do it.